Hello, welcome to my 3D version of the Starship Shooter game. I'm gonna be showing how the player moves, shoots, and rotates, talking about the code and how we set up our scene. So when we go to push play, we can see that we're using gravity because the ship keeps falling towards the Earth, and the camera is trying to find the target that it was following. We can see that we can do a barrel roll. We can see that our pitch is working, and we can see our yaw is working as well. When we go to turn, helps if I actually push the right button. We can see that's working. We can shoot. If I can hit the target, or I can just run into it. We can see that the die function works. When we come into the scripting, we can see how it's working. So when I go to, we're using a pawn controller again. So here I have my Starship pawn and the actual player controller that it's coming from. We're referencing our pawn. The shooter is for how the target's shooting off of a fire point I made. I'll show that one later. Um, we can see what we learned from uh, the rotations because we're using quartinions again. I don't know the rotation one. We can see here that we're using W, A, S, and D to forward, back, left, and right. We're using Q and S for rolls, and we're using Z and X for the pitch. We're using space down here for shooting. Oh, and Z and X is how we're doing our pitch. We're doing roll, yaw, and pitch, the Q and E. We can see on our Starship pawn how it's actually functioning. Unity's gravity for the rigid body was a little too strong, so here I'm going to lower it down to 2. These are our public speeds that we can change. And then we have the linear and angular dampening that slows down the ship from spinning or when you're pressing forward or backward. Um, so after it gets the rigid body, it turns off gravity. It uses this one to enable the gravity. We used a regular add force with the force.force, but for the override on the controller for yaw, roll, and pitch, I found this. Hold on, Carter. I also found this space self that takes the ship space into account, or whatever this component is on. But for here, it's the pawn. For the roll, pitch and yaw, and that does the transforms off of time delta time. So it's not coming off of the frame rate, it's coming off of, or it's not coming off of like physical time, it's coming off Unity's frame rate. And that's the pawn controller. And for our camera, I used yeah, so there's a target. What it's following is the ship's transform. That's why it tries to go inside the ship whenever I stop. It has an offset. Right now it's just set for negative, or it's -8 on the Z and then 3 on the X. It's using an offset magnitude of 1. This is just kind of like a multiplier. And it's using these as a minimum and maximum. So how close and far I can get when I press the O and the L keys. I'll show that here in a second too. How it's actually speeding up to follow the ship, and its look ahead and its look height is just another offset that it's coming from off the ship. They're public variables that we can change if it gets a little too low or anything like that, if we don't have to mess with the parameters for this one. We're using the late update because it's not really before the movement updates, before like physics are actually happening. So if the target doesn't equal anything, if I don't actually have a target for the camera to look at, it'll return. But what it's trying to do is to handle the offset, follow the target, and then actually looking at the target point. So here we can see the handle offset is when we're pressing O and L, what's actually happening. It's doing that offset magnitude and then setting the offset change speed into the offset magnitude and then timesing that by uh, the time delta time. And then so that's what's happening. We're either minusing or subtracting that equation. We're setting a clamp so it can't go any further than what our offset is, what it's trying to set. We're using the follow target on normalized. Um, so it gets this offset direction by the offset magnitude into the normalized. And then it takes that desired position for the target and does it on a transform direction with that normalized. And then the lerp finds 2 points. So what it's looking at is the desired position, and it uses that transform position. So where I'm turning to, uses the lerp to actually follow the new position where it's trying to go using time delta time. So frame rate dependent, not the internet speed. And then looking at the target point, it's using the quaternion. I don't know how to say that word. I don't even know how to spell it to be most of the time. It's a good thing this thing's got a little red line under there. We can fix it. Vector 3, what it's trying to do is it's look at the target, look ahead, with the look ahead distance and the look offsite, and then the look rotation, and then it's using that to do the transform rotation. To see that in the game, we can see here, I'll click on the camera, and we can see this offset magnitude. I pressed the wrong play button, sorry, but this offset magnitude will start changing, so it'll press O, and we can zoom out, and we can press L, and it'll start coming in. See if I can hit this freaking thing again. Oh, I still missed. I'm trying to hit one of these asteroids. I try to make it as big as I could, but they're off of the Kenny sprites. I didn't make them. Okay, let's see. All right, so we can see that we can actually damage them if we hit them. Should have made their colliders a little bit bigger, I guess. I was trying to make their shape bigger. It is super hard to try to get used to the controls. Oh, we got it. And then we can see when we actually hit one of them, just to make sure that our health and our colliders are working. And we are using a singleton game manager. So we're using if the instance of this singleton equals nothing, then it'll create a game manager. If it doesn't have if it already has a game manager, like uh, in the game, like if I accidentally added another one, it'll destroy this game manager that it's trying to create. So we can see it's a singleton pattern. It's going to be the only static one that we can get. And we can actually use this to reference from any of the other scripts now. We also have our shooting. So we made the projectile prefab, which is I made a meteor, just scaled it down so it shoots little tiny meteors at the meteors. I made an empty game object, named it Firepoint, and just stuck it in those 2 exposed parameters on the inspector. And then for whatever reason, if I forget or whenever I go to have like multiple lives, if that kind of gets messed up, I'll have a fallback, which will be a spawn distance of how far the projectile is going to shoot in front of the ship's transform. But if the on shoot, so when I press the spacebar on shoot, it's making sure that it has a projectile prefab. If it doesn't, then it doesn't go boom, no boom. It comes out of the vector 3, which is the spawn position and the spawn rotation for what's actually um, coming off the transform. It's not really like going to be able to spin, but it's the origin of the transform, and then the whatever the rotation. So whichever the location, the direction I'm looking at. And for if the fire point isn't there, it's going to use the secondary one for if I forgot. But if it is there, if it's not equal to nothing, so if it actually has it there, it'll spawn off of here. If I forget to put it there for whatever reason, it'll spawn off here with the fallback spawn distance. And what it's doing is it's instantiating those, it's creating those little prefabs of that projectile prefab coming out of the spawn rotation and spawn positions. And just for an extra little piece that I did, I created a little piece of terrain with some textures I made in Substance Designer, and went on to materials and created a little base map, a normal map, and then it was supposed to have like more moss on it. You can kind of see it in some spots, but as it's tiled out into the 100 by 100 space, it kind of looks a little less, but that's the base mask right now. And so far, this is the 3D shooter game. So we can do movement, we can move the camera. It's really hard to shoot and aim, but for right now, we can do all that. Yeah, that's pretty much what happens to me every time I die. I either hit the ground and die, or I hit one of my meteors. But this is my game so far. Thank you.